Today's conversation is sponsored by the Billy Keels Advisory Program. If you want to learn more about how to make your 9-to-5 optional, just go to billykeels.com/advising. Once again, that's billykeels.com/advising.
You're listening to the Going Long podcast, the #1 podcast for the strategies, tactics, and actions high wage earners need for living an intentionally designed life of wealth and resilience.
Welcome to the Going Long podcast. We're back once again to continue to help to educate you so that you feel much more comfortable as well as confident building the resilient and wealthy life that you truly want to lead. I'm your host, Billy Keels, and I'm really welcoming you back for another solo episode, one that's going to get right to the point and is going to give you the value that you're looking for. But before I do that, like I always like to do, say thank you so much for continuing to invest your time, your energy with us and with me. And thank you for tagging us across social media, especially on LinkedIn, especially on Instagram. It means the world to us because you're continuing to help to bring more people to the Going Long podcast and help to keep us in the top 1.5% of podcasts globally. So thanks for once again for that. And for continuing to make sure that you're tagging us across social media. And also for those of you that are continuing to leave your honest written reviews as well as ratings, it means the world to us. So thank you for that. And if you want to check out any of the previous episodes, any of the previous more than 400 episodes at this point in time, just go to billykeels.com/podcast. Once again, that's billykeels.com/podcast. And so today, I want to talk to you about something that's come up recently. And it's one of these things that, especially when you are a high wage earner, you're someone who is a high performer or a top performer in your company, especially if you're one of these companies that's like a really big company, multinational. As you know, I spent a lot of time working for enterprise software companies, especially towards the latter part of my career, almost 2 decades. And it's one of these things that I see that comes up quite frequently. And it's, there's the buzzwords and everybody's talking about a side gig or a side hustle. And the reality is there are 3 things I'm absolutely sure that have been holding you back from starting a side hustle or a side gig or a second job. And here's the thing. I want to talk to you about those. I want to point those out to you. And then I'm going to give you actually 3 things that you can actually do to overcome these 3 reasons that are holding you back. And I really want to talk to that specific person. I mean, if I just tell you a little bit about where I was when I kind of got started in the thinking about a side hustle, but just give you a little bit of the backstory was, I was somebody who at the time I'd been working in really large companies. Like I said, I was working for a company, an enterprise software company, had 150,000 employees. I was at this point in time in my late 30s and let's say, I think it was 36, 37, something like that. I was in a middle manager role in these very, very large companies, but an executive within the company. And it was, one of these things where the days were really, really long. The nights were really, really short. I constantly had work on my mind, how I was going to move up the ladder, how I was going to make things better financially for myself, for my family. I mean, you know the gig. So this is one of those things where all of this was going on. And at the same time, I knew that I really liked the role that I was in. At the same time, I knew that there was something more for me. Like I was doing my job and I was doing it really well. I was making a lot of money. I was moving up the org chart. And at the same time, there was this kind of thing inside of me that like, I knew that I could be doing something else. Right. And so I started watching and seeing on either TV or the internet that, people were talking more and more about the side hustle and the side gig and all this kind of stuff. And, even though I wanted that stuff, I realized that, I wanted more. And at the same time, there was kind of a struggle inside of me to figure out, all right, well, exactly what is it that how can I get there? So, and then really honestly, silently in my mind, I was thinking, but even if I did do a side hustle, like I was making really, really good money, like well into the 6 figures and sometimes even, let's just say well into the 6 figures. And at the time, there's also, why would I do something like that? I thought, well, I've got this great corporate reputation. Things are out going along. If I distract myself, quote unquote, what would my coworkers think? Like, Billy's completely distracted. He's not here. He's not going, he's not really into as much of the sales gig as he should be. I was worried about what would happen if my performance went down. My performance went down. Would my bosses wonder, like, am I being distracted? And what would my bosses think? Like all these things were going on in my mind. And I thought, you know what? I was just struggling with this kind of stuff. And I thought to myself, well, you know what? If something happens to me, like happens to, and I think if you haven't heard episode 405, you should go back and listen to episode 405 because I talked about a colleague. I changed the name of the colleague. And that colleague that I talked about, as someone who was in their, in their 50s, they were no longer in a job. And I thought, well, you know what? That could be me. But the thing is there were these three things that I realized that were holding me back. And these are the three things that I want to talk to you about. I didn't start a side gig initially or a side hustle because number one, I wasn't crystal clear as to why I really should do it. Like I said, I was making a lot of money, I had a good reputation, I was moving up the org chart, but I just wasn't really clear on why I would want to even quote unquote risk that. The second thing is I didn't really 100% know where I wanted to start. Like, what would I actually do? Like, what would this side hustle look like? What would this other business look like? And then the third one, and this is probably one you'll be able to relate to, because if you're anything like me, as a high achiever, top performer, I like to do everything on my own, especially when I get started with things, because no one I thought would do it as well as I did. And so not being clear on what I wanted to do, not knowing where to start, and being a high achiever and not asking for help were three reasons that were holding me back from getting started with the side hustle. But the more and more that I started seeing other people actually do it, and I saw proof points because there were people that I used to work with at the same company that went out and they started their own business, and their businesses were anything from, there were people that started real estate agencies, so more on the sales side of the real assets. Other people that had started other software companies that were non-competing in the company that I was working for at the time. So I actually had these proof points of people that were actually doing it. So I knew that it was possible. The thing is, I just had to come up with my own plan. I had to come up with something that was going to work for me, for my situation, for my family, and to be able to move forward on it. So what did I do? Well, I stopped. I sat down and I created my plan. I realized that, okay, first of all, I wasn't doing it because I wasn't clear. So I had to get super crystal clear as to why I was doing it. Why would I risk the six-figure salary? Why would I risk the positive reputation that I had within the company, the ability to get fast-tracked, the ability to move up the org chart faster, more responsibility, more money, more influence? But once I did and I stopped and I got crystal clear, I realized that it was about being able to have more control, to be able to do with the things that I wanted to with the people that I love the most when I wanted to. And I got really, really crystal clear on why I would make that leap. That was the first thing. The second thing is I had to figure out where I wanted to start. And so I mentioned to you before, I was very fortunate. I had a boss who talked to me about real estate specifically, and was living in Spain and had real estate assets that were outside of Spain and in the UK, specifically in Scotland. And so I looked at that. I looked at, continuing to do the paper assets, because I'd been doing some of that, playing on a really, really, really low level. I thought I could maybe do more of that. I had talked to people that had different types of businesses. Fortunate to have family and friends that were in different businesses, so I was able to evaluate those. But the thing that I chose, and I think everyone here knows, if you're here on the Going Long podcast, I chose to get specific knowledge, double down on real estate, real assets, because those were the things that made the most sense for me. Even though I lived in a software space, that being able to touch, hold, understand a business model for something as simple as real estate, that's the path that I decided to go down. And then the third thing that I did to kind of overcome these challenges was, although I'm a high achiever, I decided that, you know what, even though I feel like I do things better than everybody else and and this is, if you're a high achiever, you're probably smiling going, yeah, I do too. I realized that I'm not the smartest person in the room. There are people that know more than me, especially down this track, specifically real estate assets, specifically being able to build a company around that, not just buy properties, but actually understand process and be able to generate enough of the revenue and create the belief of being able to go out and have that business. So I invested in myself and had a one-on-one private coach. Now, that private coach for me was there to answer my very specific questions, understood my very unique situation, and was also helping me to be able to get those responses, direct, specific responses, as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And that helped me because I'm somebody who needed and needs to have my hand held. It's just one of those things that I would prefer. I didn't want to sit in a group setting. I wanted my questions answered when I wanted them. And so that was something that helped me as well. So being able to get the specific answers to my specific questions was the third thing that happened. And so as I move forward, this didn't work perfectly. There were mistakes along the way. There were errors along the way. There were, I've shared this multiple times. I mean, one of the things, I had a property that cost me a lot of money because I didn't simply read the home inspection report. Well, when you don't read the home inspection report and you see that it's going to cost you $20,000+, well, you realize that, I'm making that type of mistake was part of the game, but it was also part of the learning process. And so as I looked on this side hustle, one of the things I wanted it to be able to do was help me to leave the corporate rat race, if you will, in 5 years. Now, I didn't make that goal. I failed miserably, quite honestly, because I didn't get to 5 years. It took me almost twice that to actually get there. But along the way, what I've realized is that being able to have clarity around those three things, as I mentioned to you before, being crystal clear on why you want to do something and then start working towards that. Secondly, having a clear idea as to what you're going to double down on, what service, what product are you going to help bring to market that people are willing to pay for. And then lastly is being able to get the appropriate help that I needed to be able to get answers efficiently and be able to then operate and execute effectively through hiring a personal coach. I realized that these three things, they can be used in any way, building any type of business. And so that's something that stayed with me as we continue to offer services to the marketplace. And so I share that with you because you may be in a similar situation today where you feel like you're stuck and you don't really know, you want to have more out of life, but this side hustle, this side gig, this other job, you're not really sure on what it can be. I would say to you that if this sounds like something that you're interested in or you want to know more about, be absolutely happy to have a conversation with you, talk to you about it. And you can find out more by going to billykeels.com/advising. And you know what? If you decide that today that's not the route for you, take today's conversation. Take the 3-step process. If any of this resonated, if these 3 reasons resonated with you, the 3 things that you can do to overcome those reasons so that you can continue to move forward, just use the content from today's conversation to be able to go out and get started. If you want a higher touch, if you want someone that can be there to hold your hand along the way, guide you along the way, like I said, go to billykeels.com/advising. And while you're taking the content today and putting it into action, I'll be here preparing for the next solo episode. So until then, go out and make it a great day. And thank you very much. Today's conversation was sponsored by the Billy Keels Advisory Program. If you're looking to make your 9-to-5 optional and need some help, just go to billykeels.com/advising. Once again, that's billykeels.com/advising.